All right, looks like we are live. I want to welcome everybody to Standing For Truth. My name is Donny, and I am your host and moderator for tonight's debate between Trey Jadlow and Randy. Specifically, we are engaging the important question: do Christians have a consistent evidentiary standard? Gentlemen, before we get into the opening statements, why don't we get acquainted by having some brief introductions into who you are? Firstly, I do want to say this is both of your first time here on the Standing for Truth debate platform. And so it's always awesome to have new guests and fresh faces to engage these topics. And so, Trey, why don't we start with you? Thank you for giving us your time, of course. And for the audience, a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your channel or ministry, if you have one.
Okay, great. Thanks. It's nice to meet you, Donny. I'm glad to be in your program. I'm grateful for your kindness in hosting our exchange tonight. I live in Kansas City area. I'm a dental lab technician by trade. You can see my office behind me. So in other words, I make teeth for a living. Been probably over 30 years. I've been doing that. And I've been a Christian. I'm 57 years old. I've been a Christian 37 years since I was 20. I am of the Reformed Baptist strain of Christianity, and I enjoy metaphysics. I'm fascinated by metaphysics and questions of ultimacy. So if I'm going to have a bent in my way of interacting with my faith, it's going to be more on the rational side rather than the empirical side. I very much enjoy engaging questions of ultimacy. I find it fascinating. Most people are enamored with the idea of how things work. I'm fascinated with why. What is the why for anything? And so that's kind of the motivating factor for me. And it's kind of had me just kind of embark on this journey, which we'll talk about tonight, regarding my position as to why I believe what I believe and why I embrace the Christian faith.
Very good, Trey. I appreciate that introduction. I really am looking forward to this debate, and I'm looking forward to seeing what both of you, Trey and Randy, are going to bring to the table in terms of points. And so for those in the audience that want to see more from Trey, I do have your YouTube channel linked in the description box for people to check out. Randy, this is also your first time here, and so I do appreciate you giving us your time to engage this specific topic. And so a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your channel.
Yeah, and thanks, Donny, for hosting us, and thanks, Trey, for your time as well. I could give a really short answer. Basically, the complete opposite of everything Trey said is what I'm interested in and what I understand and recognize. So I guess that's why we're here, right? The iron sharpens iron and the bounce ideas off of each other and whatnot. But yeah, was raised in New York State and as a cradle Catholic. And then in my 20s, after moving to the top of the Bible Belt and having a 40-minute drive to and from work every day, started listening to a lot of, I guess you would consider Protestant Christian radio. And was kind of like intrigued in that because like I said, been raised in the Catholic Church for literally over 20 years, probably a good 20 years. And then I was intrigued by that. So gave myself, like, quote unquote, to the Lord in my very early 20s. But I even call myself a bit of an apologist. I dove deep into apologetics and things like that. And then 20 years beyond that, in my early 40s, I actually, in trying to reach one of my sons for the Lord, had a lot of time in my hands, was getting ready to sell a house and was trying to remodel the house. And I knew I had about 80 to 100 hours worth of work. And I'm like, do I just listen to worship music, or would the Lord have me reach one of my middle son for the Lord? Because out of my three sons, he was the one that kind of just didn't buy it, the whole Christian message. The other two were kind of, one bought it. The other one was kind of like indifferent, just went along with the program, I felt. But the middle one was kind of stubborn and said, I just don't buy it. It seems sketchy to me, to use his words back then as a teenager. And so about 80 to 100 hours of listening to debates and lectures. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with the Justin Briley's podcast over across the pond there. just kind of like was scouring for anything, just trying to come up with because he kind of used like the atheist word a couple of times. Like he goes, I think I'm an atheist. I just don't buy it. So I'm like thinking like, I have to somehow get to the bottom of this, have find the best arguments against atheism, and just to kind of reach my son for the Lord. I don't want my son going to hell. And here he had a Christian father, and I was a board member on the Assemblies of God Church, and I led worship. I was very active, and basically about a year and a half later, I came out the other side, an atheist. One domino fell after another. I just researched in that, and not only did dominoes fall, but a year or two after that, the more I dove into it, the hungrier I was to get to the bottom of this. Like, why are these things not true? I talked to a good friend of mine who was a youth pastor at the Pentecostal church, and he said, what are you saying, that they're just lying, like they're not telling the truth? And so I started diving deep, and it was quote mining, misquotes, willful ignorance, sometimes intentional deception, sometimes just, like I said, willful ignorance, blocking out evidence that basically contradicted their position. And I started documenting it all in the Word doc, and the Word doc got so long, I said, I kind of needed to make this into a website. Like, this is crazy. So much stuff in this Word doc. It was like a 41-page Word doc. And then that's, it hit me one day. I was literally making dinner, and I said, these people are like literally lying. And I think I heard someone, maybe Richard Dawkins or someone, coined the term lying for Jesus. And I'm like, it's actually what they're doing. It's like, it was that. And then I heard Justin Bradley, basically he was interviewed by someone, and they asked him about if anything shook his faith. And he answered, well, there's been a couple things, but I mean, I'm involved in ministry. My wife's involved in ministry. Like, we're kind of committed at this point. And I'm just like thinking, like, are you kidding me? So basically they're protecting their investment. They almost have to believe, because they've invested so much that there's no turning back at this point. They're literally, their livelihood, their salaries and all that are basically paid for by this ministry. And that's probably why the Clergy Project was started by Daniel Dennett and his wife. But that's kind of where I am today. And that was, I think, 8 years ago now. And I've just been diving into it. And when time allows, I'm like I said, I'm a father and a husband. But when time allows, it kind of, I think the one thing that Trey and I have in common is we kind of like, it almost turned into like a hobby for us. So if I had to draw like a similarity, everything else I think between us, we will probably find out is dissimilar. But I think the hunger for truth, and I actually said that. Fortunately, my podcast that was around years ago, my testimony is documented in podcast form, and in this certain podcast, and I actually have a copy of it because the questions I asked like walked through my entire journey. But what was interesting is, and I recalled it. I remember saying when I actually held a Bible study at my house every Friday night for a number of years, probably between 3 and 5 years, with the guys from the church. And I remember telling them then, saying, I'm going to follow truth wherever it leads. If it leads me to Mormonism or to Buddhism or to atheism, doesn't matter. Like, I'm not going to be so committed to something where I have to protect that investment. I can't just turn away and say, you know what, it just doesn't add up anymore. So I remember saying that if it leads to Buddhism, Mormonism, atheism, I don't care. And a good, I don't know, 9-10 years later, it led to atheism. So here I am. Sorry if that was long-winded, but
that's okay, Randy. I appreciate the introduction, and that's why we're here, to get us out of our, as I like to say, theological and worldview echo chambers, and get into the debate octagon and engage these important topics, engage these important points. So Trey and Randy, I do appreciate the introductions, and I do appreciate the time you've given to us for tonight's debate question. Again, for anybody just joining us, we are engaging the question, do Christians have a consistent evidentiary standard? And if the audience wants to see more from Trey and Randy, I do have both of their the relevant links in the description box for people to check out. And so format-wise for tonight, it is going to be a little more informal than formal. It's going to be very free-flowing in terms of the discussion. We are, just in order to set the foundation for what we're going to be discussing and debating tonight, we will have roughly 10 to 12 minute opening statements to kind of lay out the positions of our guests and some opening arguments. And then we're just going to jump into a discussion. And so we'll have Trey and Randy engage each other's points, asking each other questions relevant to tonight's topic. And at the end of it all, we'll get you guys in the audience involved. So please make sure you're tagging me with your questions. If you do have a question for Trey, question for Randy, just let me know who the question is for specifically. And tag me either at Donny or at Standing For Truth, and we'll have some fun answering your questions. So with that, we're going to get into the first opening statement for tonight's debate. And that'll be you, Trey. And so, Trey, whenever you're ready, just let me know. And the floor is yours.
All right, well, let's jump into this. Obviously, tonight I have I'm taking the affirmative stance for evidentiary standard for Christianity. So before I begin my argumentation, though, or lay it out, I'd like to give a little background as to how I come about what I believe and how I get there. And I want to say at the onset, the question is, do Christians have a consistent evidentiary standard? I'm actually making a stronger commitment than an evidentiary standard. I am saying that I'm going to found my argumentation in rational proof of the mathematical sort, not empirical evidence, but rather analytical truth that cannot be refuted if the instrumental tools for investigation are granted to me, which I will ask at the beginning of our Q&A or our engagement time with Randy. But before I get into that, though, I'd like to just point out that there are three types of schools that generally dot our landscape today when we're trying to talk about defending the Christian faith. And the first one is evidentialism, which is empirical in nature, which is what we're. I think that's the foundation or the approach that Randy is used to hearing about his background with this. It sounds very much like much of the information that he was interacting with regarding Christianity was empirical in nature. And what this is going to do is it's going to give you probability argumentation for Christianity. I think Justin Brierley is very much, although I've seen him given some analytical argumentation, but he is much of the time he is using an evidentiary approach. And what an evidentialist is going to say is that, well, it's more likely than not that this is true. I'm going to go stronger than that. I'm going to give an analytical argument that say that it is true by definition necessarily. Then the second approach that is more of a rational approach is presuppositionalism, which seeks to also demonstrate God, but from a way that they want to have more secure or a more unassailable stance regarding the existence of God, and they generally employ the transcendental argument for God. And the problem with them is, of course, that they commit the petitio principii fallacy. You cannot have your conclusion in any of your premises when you're making an argument. And presuppositionalism says that you can't have any true knowledge unless you begin with the triune God of Scripture in order to have knowledge. And what they do is they confuse the order of being with the order of knowing, or the ordo ascendi with the ordo cognoscendi. And what they're doing is they're, in conflating those categories, they're committing the informal fallacy of petitio principii, and that does not allow you to escape the charge of being irrational. So from my perspective, I'm very harsh on presuppositionalism, even though many people that I very much respect and love hold this view. It's kind of useless, in my opinion. And then the third approach that I hold to is classicism, and it's going to be an approach both of rational or orientation as well as empirical information, but it begins with rational argumentation. And it does not commit informal fallacy. So evidentialism is empirical in nature. It can't give you certainty. It can only give you probability. Presuppositionalism seeks to give rational analytical certainty, but it commits an informal fallacy in the process. And so classicism, in the same way as presuppositionalism, I'm going to rely on analytical argumentation at the base of my argumentation, but it does not employ an informal fallacy. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to construct my argument in three parts. And before you can have the Word of God, which is where oftentimes evidentialism will start. They'll start with a reliability of the Scriptures, and then they'll usually focus on prophecy and resurrection. But before you have a Word of God to deal with the content, you've got to have a God of the Word. And we are arguing, I am arguing tonight with an atheist, okay? And this is a person who says that he positively affirms that there is no God, or he holds the softer view that says that he sees no reason to say that there is such a thing as God. He sees no evidence for such a thing. And so I'm going to begin then with the argument for the existence of God. And I'm going to argue by way of an argument from contingency. It'll be a cosmological argument. It'll be Thomas Aquinas's second way. Third way. And then I'm going to argue in the second portion of my argumentation for moral law, which is an argument for teleology, which would be Thomas's fifth way, St. Thomas Aquinas. And these two arguments are going to correspond roughly with Romans 1 and Romans 2. And these two arguments are generally categorized as philosophy rather than theology, because it's information and it's available to everyone. And it's not evidential in nature. It's analytical in nature. And like I said, if you grant my presuppositions, then I'm going to ask for epistemological understanding, which is not presuppositionalism. We'll discuss this more. The first two parts of my argument, that there is a self-existent creator and that there is teleology or purpose in the universe, they necessarily follow. And like I said, I've been doing this over 12 or probably close to 15 years. I don't know how long I've been doing this argument. And never have I seen not only a defeater for the argument, never seen a valid rebuttal. And so then we'll move on to the Word of God. And once we have the Word of God established, we can then move on to the specifics of Christian faith. Now, these evidences that I will give for the Christian faith are evidential in nature, not analytical proofs. They're going to focus on what the evidentialist starts with. I'm going to hit it in third gear. It's going to be my third part of my argument. And I'm going to just focus on the evidence after we've established the necessary corollaries of God's existence and there be purpose in the universe. So when I debated Matt Dillahunty a few weeks ago, and he just refused to engage the argument. He just played games for 40 minutes. And I said, before I started, you're going to get a lot of maybe complaining from the other side of the aisle, maybe some name calling, saying that I'm misrepresenting what he's saying. I said, but what you're not going to get is a rebuttal. And that's exactly what happened. And I think it's probably going to happen tonight too. I don't know. Randy seems like a nice guy, and hopefully it'll be more fruitful than trying to deal with Matt. But I can say with some degree of confidence, I don't think Randy's going to be able to rebut the arguments for my first two portions, because you have to concede them if you're going to be rational at all. Okay, so I'll just as a closing statement here, I'll go ahead and give my opening argument for the first portion, and it's the four possibilities argument, same thing I used with Matt. And it says that if something exists, there are only four possibilities. And either it is an illusion, it is self-created, it is self-existent, or it is created by something that is self-existent. These are the only four possibilities to explain it. Matt was trying to say another one. What if it was created by something that was self-existent? He just added complexity. He violated Occam's razor and did not add a fifth option at all. Nobody's given me a fifth option. I'm not saying there isn't one, but I've never heard one. And I'd be delighted to see if maybe Randy could come up with one. But those are the only four possibilities. And only one of those four possibilities is viable. And when we begin our exchange portion, we'll discuss these in greater detail. So with that, I'll go ahead and close and turn it over to my friend Randy and let him give his opening statement. Thank you very much.
Trey, thank you very much for the opening statement. I do appreciate it. Randy, we're going to hand it over to you now. And so whenever you're ready, you've got roughly 10 to 12 minutes for an opening statement. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Yeah, like I said, I don't care a lot for metaphysics. I actually took a during COVID, Stanford had free philosophy classes and that, so I actually took a semester of philosophy at Stanford. So I understand, the basics in that. But yeah, so when you deal with analytical arguments, it's tough because they're true by definition, by the way you define the terms, you use them. And that's actually kind of like step one. You have to analytical arguments kind of turn into you can make theories out of them, and then once you have a theory, then you actually in the end, for any kind of evidence, you have to test it empirically to basically validate it. So I mean, you could start with an analytical argument, but you have to get to empiricism in the end. I mean, with Einstein's relativity, we had to do all this stuff. That's kind of how things work. But yeah, I'm a materialist, and I really don't believe in free will. The more I look into it, I'm more of a determinist materialist. I don't know if it's considered philosophical naturalism, maybe, or some metaphysical or methodological naturalism, I believe it is. But anyway, yeah, what we use every day, and I believe that if there was a God who created us, there shouldn't be a different standard of evidence for that God than there would be for us. And otherwise, especially if we're trying to detect this God and verify this God, and supposedly people have written about this God, so we have what someone once said. It's almost like this God, if it's true, if he's using a different set of logic, if he's using a different way of discovering him, that how a different way than the way we validate and the standard evidence that we hold for our financial life, our medical life, our legal life, our paternal life, when we parent, and that there shouldn't be a completely different standard, like some kind of nebulous philosophical analytical standard for that as a basis. We would never accept that with with our everyday life, with things that actually matter when it comes to our work, our livelihood, our legal affairs, our financial affairs. We would just never accept that. So we have to get to empiricism somehow in the end. I mean, we might be able to start with some kind of philosophy in that, and philosophy is it's fun, it's entertaining, it's thought provoking, but I don't believe philosophy alone can ever get you to where you need to be. And the standard, and the reason I asked Trey if he's interested in debating this topic, is because the evidentiary standard that we use every day in our affairs should be the same standard that we use to validate the existence of a God. Otherwise, as someone once said, it's as if God hid plastic and gave us metal detectors. He's outside of this. We can't. It's special pleading. Everything, all the tools that we have, and the logic that we have here, and the standards that we have here, and the evidence we have here doesn't apply to this particular deity. And to me, that's, I mean, if that's actually the case, and to answer Trey's question, I guess it's soft atheism. I just don't believe that there's proportional evidence for the claims that have been put forth by religions, whether it's Islam, Mormonism, Judaism, Christianity, that extraordinary, as Carl Sagan said, the Sagan standard, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And I guess claims are a form of like a weak evidence, but they don't. A claim by itself has to be backed up by evidence. The claim itself is not the evidence. If I say red cars cause cancer, that's a claim. Now I have a whole body of evidence that I have to build around that, and the burden of proof is on me to prove that red cars cause cancer. It's not for everyone else in the world to run around and spend their entire rest of their life proving that red cars don't cause cancer. I'm the one who made the claim. The burden of proof is on me. So I don't believe that any God claims have met their burden of proof, and I don't believe that the standard that we use in our everyday lives is the same standard. And I found this with my own journey. The standard that I had for, like I said, my legal, financial, medical affairs was not the same standard I was applying to my my Christianity, my personal faith, any of that. That's basically where I stand on that. I can turn it back over to Trey, or we can get into the open discussion at that point.
Randy, thank you very much for your opening statement. That concludes the opening statements for tonight's debate. And so what we're going to do is just jump into more of an informal discussion. We'll keep it as free-flowing and organic as possible. Since Randy just ended with his opening statement, Trey, why don't we hand it over to you to pick the first point or topic that you think would be good to engage? Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Okay, so let me say this, Randy. You said you left the church because, and now it makes all sense, you're at lyingforjesus.org, because people were kind of being dishonest. Either they were being flat out dishonest, or they were maybe trying to boost the evidence to be what it wasn't, and maybe taking scriptures out of context, stuff like that. I actually quite agree with you on that. I got saved. So you were a Pentecostal or charismatic Christian, is that right?
It's a little complicated. So from Catholicism to I worked for a bunch of different software companies, so I moved from state to state. But the short answer is non-denominational at one point, and then because the local church was Pentecostal, and it was down the street from us, and I didn't know about Pentecostalism, about the whole speaking in tongues and that back then. But so basically, I mean, for as an umbrella, it would be Roman Catholic to like evangelical, but yeah, Pentecostal, and like I'd say like the last 6 years.
Okay. Well, because that makes sense to me, because I got saved in the charismatic church. Have you ever heard of Youth with a Mission or YWAM? Either one of you guys?
No.
Okay, it's a youth missions organization. That's where I became a Christian, and it's charismatic, kind of Pentecostal type thing. And I jumped into the IHOP movement, which is it was Kansas City Fellowship. Have you ever heard of that? The Kansas City Prophetic Movement. You ever heard of that?
You said IHOP? I was thinking pancakes at that point.
No, it's same acronym, but it means International House of Prayer. Anyway, it's a movement in the late 80s, early 90s that was very much into signs and wonders and miracles and all that stuff. I jumped into that wholeheartedly after I left YWAM. And I came to a point where I just said, same thing. I thought, there are so many people that are lying for Jesus. And I eventually, just a short version of that, I left the charismatic movement and no longer consider myself a part of that movement. But anyway, so I can have some sympathy there with you with that concern that you had. But anyway, that was just an aside there. So let's go ahead and jump into our discussion now. And I always ask before I begin my inquiry and we begin questioning these things, I have to have two epistemological presuppositions as a starting point in order for us to be able to have inquiry into this world. And the first thing I ask you is rational coherence, or most notably the law of non-contradiction. Would you agree that that is one of the building blocks that we got to have before to interpret any kind of information?
Yeah, identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle.
Yes, the three. Yes, and in fact, I'll employ all three of those probably. All right, and then the second one is the basic reliability of sense perception. Doesn't have to be perfect, of course, obviously, which is what you said. You said basically any argument's got to be able to be empirically interacted with, because our senses are the only connection that we have with this world that we have. And if we don't have basic reliability of sense perception, we can't interact with anything. So
yeah,
you would grant that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, to establish maximal certainty, in the end, I think things have to be empirically tested. Even Einstein's theories and all that, and theoretical physics. It in the end, and they're actually working on a time machine now based on the bending of space-time fabric, and they're trying to empirically prove that. It's all theoretical and analytical at this point, but they're actually building a mechanism now. So
yeah, and so we've got rational coherence and we've got sense perception. The sense perception gives us the stuff that we can interact with, and the logic gives us the ability to be able to categorize it and to apply the scientific method to it, really. Science in many ways is just a studying of causal relationship and in categorization. Okay, so All right, so if something exists, this is the first part of the argument. If something exists, there are only four possibilities. And the first possibility was, if something exists, it is an illusion. And this is what some people will say. And of course, Matt thought he was cutting a fat hog in the belly by saying it's irrational. That's the whole point. Do you agree that everything cannot be an illusion?
I mean, we have to use we have to presuppose it's not an illusion, I guess would be the best way to say it.
Well, here's the thing. Are you familiar with Descartes' cogito? Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
Okay. So if there's somebody asking a question, something thinking about it, there's got to be a thinker. And if there's got to be a thinker, there's got to be a being. Therefore, some people say, yeah, everything's an illusion. I said, well, who's asking the question then? Okay. If you're going to say that everything is an illusion, then there's got to be, what are we talking about? Who's saying things? Somebody's got to be asking a question. And for my argument, all I need is solipsism. It's fine with me. All I need is an inquirer. Do you agree that you, the inquirer, exist?
Yeah, and I've heard that if everything's an illusion, then you wrote every song that you've ever heard and every movie you ever watched, and like, so it's, I mean, I guess it's possible, like a dream, but it's, I guess, unlikely. I don't know. We can prove it.
Who's asking? Who's saying that everything that's written was a dream? And what is a dream? I mean, obviously, there's some concrete something that is asking a question. So it's not an illusion. Everything else could be, you could be an illusion. That's fine. I don't care about that. I'm talking about just one thing. All I need is one thing that exists.
Yeah. I watched the debate like on double speed the other day just to familiarize myself with some of your questions and that. And Matt pointed out though, and I actually typed it out because I wanted to see if it made sense when I typed it. But he said if it's an illusion, then it's not real, and if it's not real, then it doesn't exist. So you're actually saying if it's something exists, one explanation for it is that does not exist.
Say that last thing again.
So he pointed out that if it's an illusion, then it's not real, and if it's not real, then it doesn't exist. So you're actually saying that if something exists, one explanation for it is that it does not exist.
Right. It's self-refuting. It doesn't make sense to say that everything is an illusion. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I don't see.
You've got the idea of, you can't even think of nothing. Nothing is incomprehensible because the idea of nothing is something.
True. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. All right. So the first, that which exists is not an illusion. And then secondly, the second is that which exists is self-created. Do you see the problem with that? Saying something is self-created.
If something is self-created, yeah, it's probably contradictory at that point.
Yeah, it's a violation of law of non-contradiction because it would need to make itself before it exists. It would need to precede itself before it is. So it cannot create itself. Yeah. So if something exists, it cannot be self-created. All right, we've gotten past the more than what Matt went through. It's 40 minutes. All right, so then the third option is that which exists is self-existent. Okay, and for the purposes of our conversation now, we're basically just focusing on the inquirer. Most importantly, you, Randy, as the inquirer. Would you say that you are self-existent?
No, I didn't create myself.
Well, self-existence is not self-creation. Self-existence is irrational. Self-creation is irrational. Self-existence is not irrational. There's nothing irrational, no violation of law of non-contradiction or laws of thought to say that something is self-existent.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, these are metaphysical nebulous terms or nebulous concepts. But what was the question on self-existence? Is it rational? What did you ask about self-existence?
There's no law of thought that is violated by positing something that is self-existent.
Yeah, as far, like I said, I'm not a theological or philosophical buff, but as far as from the semester I took and from my research in that, yeah, I don't see it being contradictory.
Yeah, there's nothing irrational about it whatsoever. Okay, but you would agree that you are not self-existent and you are the one that we are talking about if something exists.
Right.
Okay, so the first three do not work. So the only example or only possibility that's left is that which exists is created by something that is self-existent. It's also employing the law of causality, which is analytically true. So if you have an effect, you must have a cause. Every effect requires a cause.
In motion, we know that in motion, as best we can tell, in motion, you need a cause to get to set something like in a physical motion.
Well, motion to be changed. Anything that changes is contingent by definition. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, as it results to like physical motion. Yeah.
Well, change, period. Anyway, like you change your mind. You are contingent because something gave you information outside of where you're at, whether it's physical, whether it's an idea, or whether it's something physical. It brought you to a new state of being where you said, I'm no longer what I was, although there's continuity, but you have been put into a new position of existence through that new information, and it may not have been physical at all. And that, therefore, you are a contingent being.
So a mental state or a change in mental state?
Yeah, anything.
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Change necessitates being contingent. That's just what it is. Being time bound is just a measurement of change among contingent being. That's how we measure our clocks, by looking at the what do you call it, the electron around the cesium atom, or planetary movement. It's just a measurement of change of contingent being. All right, so then you know that you exist, and you know that you are not self-existent, and you know that you didn't make yourself. So the logical corollary is that there's something somewhere that has the being distinct from you that is self-existent, that created you and sustains you moment by moment.
Well, I don't know about, I wouldn't go as far as saying a being. And I also think
there's only two capacities. You got being and non-being. Those are only two categories.
Yeah, but I wouldn't.
So you're saying nothing made you?
Not nothing made me, but I'm not going to assign agency to something. But I also think there's like a fifth and more likely than all the four.
Okay.
Except if something exists that you didn't include in those four. Okay. So like emergent properties are something that we see all the time. I mean,
that would be self-created.
An emergent property?
Yeah, that's all you're saying. You're just doing number two there.
Well, something that emerges didn't exist in a previous state. It's an unintentional emergence, like it's an unintentional property, like wind, for instance. When air molecules interact with other air molecules unintentionally, they create a force, and that force is wind.
That's just a causal relationship. That's not an emergent property.
But I'm saying
emergent property is just a magic word that people like to use to, it's like, people say that people use the God of the gaps argument. Emergent properties is the God of the gaps argument. It's not reasonable at all. It's just that they just use it because it's convenient.
Well, it's a characteristic of phenomenon that rises in the system, but it is not present, reducible, or predictable from the properties or behavior of the individual components. So
okay, but it is necessarily correlated to the causal relationship that it has. In other words, anything can't cause anything. Do you agree with that? It's a principle of proportionate causality.
Anything can't cause anything?
In other words, I cannot give the property of flying to my children. There is a logical relationship, of causal relationship, that we can predictable, that we can observe, and that we can understand in this universe. Elephants don't give rise to 747s, Boeing 747s, right?
Well, no, I mean we're kind of conflating like biological entities with steel.
I just use a reductive argument just to show, yes, that is true, that there is a causal relationship in the way things happen. Something cannot cause in something else what it itself does not have the capacity for. Yeah, you've got to have the property, even it may be what do they call it, a virtual property, or I can't think of the categories now, but it's got to be something. If it's not directly in you, like fire causing fire, but you could say like baking soda has the property of leavening if given, water and flour or whatever, if you make cornbread or whatever, a cake or something like that, it has it, although it itself is not leavening, but when you mix it properly with the proper elements, it will have that property of leavening in it. But it has to have that. It's not that there's no order to it whatsoever. So when you say there's emergent property, well, I tell you what, let's just go to the second argument, which is basically what we're arguing right now, that if there is such a thing as I hear people say the same thing. It's really weird to me. You said it's not a, you said it's not an agent or something like that. You said something may have given rise to you, but it's not an agent. Is that what you said? Or
Well,
volitional?
no, if there was a first cause, the whole Aristotle or Aristotelian, prime mover, first cause, if that's one of like a dozen or two of possibilities. But even if you were to grant that, that doesn't mean that was it didn't have agency. It didn't have that. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has consciousness. It has agency. Just kind of like wind. Wind can have an effect on something, and like wind can knock over a tree that can cause a dam and a flood. But that had no intentionality. The wind didn't intend for anything to happen.
Can the wind create philosophical societies?
Well, the wind doesn't think. So
okay,
no.
so
philosophy is an emergent property of the brain.
Okay, so you agree then that there is teleology in the universe? You know what teleology is? Telos,
Design?
purpose, goal.
Well,
yeah, it's just
teleologically is design. I did an entire video on teleology, how there's a lack of design and randomness in the universe, and especially in humans and
Did you design that video?
Yeah.
Okay, that's my point.
That I don't see a point.
So you're saying that teleology instantiates in the universe?
Design instantiates. Design makes something concrete in the universe.
It obtains. You're saying that there is such a thing as teleology in the universe?
There's forces in the universe. I don't know that they're designed.
I'm talking about us having this conversation. Is there a purpose to this conversation?
Yes, but we've evolved and emerged as sentient beings that we now have intelligence.
Okay, so is this conversation teleological?
Does it have a design to it? Yeah.
Okay, is the universe teleological? In part.
Does it have a design? I don't know if something that contains forces can be considered teleological. I see dysteleology. I see randomness. I see lots of space and waste and inefficiency.
Are you a part of the universe?
In the local presentation of the universe, yes.
Okay.
You have universe. What's that?
Are you teleological?
Do I have design? I would say incidental design, based on circumstances.
Do you purpose to live?
Do I purpose to live? Can purpose be used as a verb? I mean, I would say humans, they survive. Like we have an inherent survival.
Are you striving right now to survive? Did you eat breakfast this morning?
Yeah. Well, no, I fast, but I ate lunch. Yeah.
But generally in your life, are you seeking to survive? Every moment of your life is spent toward the sanctity of existence. Would you agree with that? Not perfectly, but that's a general
preserving existence for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so you're a teleological creature and you're part of the universe.
I'm a design. So I believe in, or I recognize like the blind watchmaker. So it's a blind design. It's a design based on what's it? The pressures of natural selection and things like that. Like picture a wood chipper that has, you're throwing logs through it and they come out, they're round, but they come out square. Like it's not really, man, it's a terrible analogy, but it's not a, I mean, did you read Dawkins' Blind Watchmaker at any point? Like
I read The Selfish Gene, no.
Yeah. Well, he had The Selfish Gene and The Blind Watchmaker. So there's a I mean, just if you look at all the errors, like we're the only species that can't breathe and swallow our food at the same time. Even snakes can do that. So I mean, I see a lot of dysteleology, a lack of design.
But you agree that
poor design or
teleology,
lack of. What's that?
okay, but you agree that teleology exists in you.
Are you using it as a purely as design teleology?
That you are purposing. We had this conversation. You're purposing to live. You watch over your children and you worry about them, that they will be okay and that they will have long lives and be prosperous in their lives.
Protection for survival. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, how does teleology instantiate unintentionally from your materialistic perspective?
How does design?
Let me say this: if there's something that's teleological, all I need is one instance of it. Me holding my finger up. I am seeking to put my finger up right now. All I need is that. If there is one instance of teleology in the universe, there's something that's eternally teleological, because unintentionality. This is. I intended to do that. Intentionality, we're talking about the law of identity, cannot instantiate unintentionally, because then unintentionality would be intentional. So if there ever were a time in the past, this is the silliness of emergent properties. If there ever were a time in the past where there was pure unintentionality, imagine the entire universe in this circle right here, all that exists, okay, everything is in there. And let's say there was a time in the past and it was unintentional. What would we have today? We would have unintentionality. But we don't have unintentionality today because we're intending to have this conversation. Therefore, there's something that is purposeful, intentional, and intention is something only personhood does. Some personal, intentional being that that gave us what we have today.
Yeah, I would say
and that's an analytical argument.
I would say unintentionality give rise to intention, especially in the physical sense, through concept of emergence. It's a phenomenon where complex behavior rises from simple interactions.
Yeah, that's just magic talk. You're not giving a justification.
Well, no, we know emergence. We know emergence happens. Like emergence can be a candidate explanation because emergence exists. A non-corporeal being with intentionality, even something that's non-corporeal that I don't even know how we would even think and reason. We don't have any explanations of that.
Well, you agree that corporeality is necessarily defined as contingent, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and everything can't be contingent, right? Because it would need to make itself before it existed.
Everything cannot be contingent.
The entire universe can't be made up of contingent being, because it would be contingent non-contingently or contingent independently, which is again a violation of law of identity.
Yeah, but there's a point where you reach emergence where you have chemical reactions, you have things like that, and that kind of that offsets like a chain of events when it kind of branches out then at that point.
Okay, if you're defining emergence just that chemicals mix together and they make different things, fine. But if you're using emergent property as somehow as a magic word to say somehow that something can just poof happen like a rabbit out of a hat without a hat or without a magician, that's ridiculous. And this is what the Darwinian synthesis relies on. It's silly. It's nice for the 19th century, science, but we're living in the 21st century. We need to move ahead.
I'm not sure I understand where you're coming from, because there's we have elements. So we have an open system. You have a planet that you have an accretion disk. So you have stars that explode. You have an accretion disk that accretes elements and energy to a planet, and you have a constant stream of photons energizing that planet. So to think that it's not inevitable, or to think that's impossible for something to emerge when you have an energy source, you have basically
is the energy
radiating.
Teleological? Is it personal?
Is the sun personal? Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so then yes, it is ridiculous to say it's emergent property. To say that purpose can instantiate unintentionally is nonsense.
So think of it this way: if a child unintentionally burns his hand on a stove, and then from that point forward he intentionally avoids the stove, that unintentionality led to intentionality.
Are humans intentional beings by definition?
Do we have intent? Yeah, we have
Human
intent.
beings are teleological beings. We are determined to survive. to try to survive. And if we don't, we say we're broken.
Right. I mean, I learned that when I was a kid, and I tried to. An ant was crawling on the sidewalk, and I was 4 years old, and I put my finger there, and it would go the other direction. I put my finger there, it would go the other direction. Yeah, we have an innate survival. Anything that's probably living is
And
probably has an innate survival.
So how are we determined indeterminately then?
How are we determined indeterminately?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying. Emergence is a phenomenon that rises where
that's just magic talk. You're not giving me a reason.
How's
You're
it
just saying
magic?
it's convenient from my perspective, therefore I just assert it.
No,
Unintentionality cannot intend.
I just gave you an example with the stove, how it can. And emergent properties.
The child is an intentional being when we start. Do you agree with that?
But he had an unintentional action and he touched the stove, and from that point on, he intentionally.
Yeah, but you're just saying he learns things as an intentional being. So what?
He learns.
You've got to give me intentionality somehow without violating the law of identity. You've got to give me the first instance of intentionality coming about unintentionally, when unintentionality is unintentional, not intentional. Yeah.
So when you have intelligence arise out of emergence, then you now have a sentient being that can reason.
That's just magic talk, my friend.
How's it magic?
You can't tell me. Is the thing from which it came unintentional?
From what I can tell you, I don't know if the beginning of the cosmos had an intention. There's no evidence to show that it has.
Well, it is, because it's intentional today. It's a logical argument, my friend.
The cosmos and universe is intentional, or we are as humans?
Are we part of the cosmos?
It's a byproduct.
Any part. I'm not saying rocks are intentional. I'm saying any part of the universe is intentional. There must be something that's eternally intentional.
So Jupiter's intentional? What is it intend?
No, I didn't say that. I said if all I need is one instance. Your intentionality of intending to have this conversation, that means that there must be something eternally intentional, because you could not intend things unintentionally.
That's a leap right there. If there's an emergent property of intentionality, then the entire universe must be intentional.
No, I didn't say that. It
violates the what we know about emergence. Literally violates emergence.
Do you believe that science is predicated upon rational coherence?
I would say yes. If I understand your
definition. That's
what
I'm saying. Yes. Logic precedes empiricism, because remember I said we went to law of non-contradiction. We need sense perception. The sense perception is the connection we have with the universe, and the logic enables us to filter that information. If you want to say an emergent property somehow that unintentionality can intend intention, you blew off logic, and you've completely thrown away the scientific. This is why we're living in such an age of darkness, I think, today. It's a lot of the stupidity we got from the Enlightenment through Immanuel Kant's philosophy.
So are you just
banned metaphysics?
So logic comes from brains. So the only evidence we have, and this is like when I was a Christian, we were always told, don't go beyond what's written. And so in philosophy, materialism, don't go beyond what we understand. There might not be an answer yet.
You're the one that's going beyond what we understand. You're saying, oh, there's some magic thing out there that makes intentionality unintentionally.
No, I'm saying there's probably most, from what we know now, intentionality comes from brains. Brains are emergent property, just like we have examples of other emergent properties.
So brains came about unintentionally. Yes. Unintentionality intended brains.
Yes.
And brains are intentional. No, so you're violating the law of identity.
No, unintentionality didn't intend. Brains are emergent property of something that was unintentional. we witnessed that.
So was unintentionality intentional when intentionality emerged?
Was unintentionality intentional? I don't even know if that sentence makes sense, to be honest with you.
I don't think it does either. You cannot have an emergent property of intentionality coming about unintentionally. It's a violation of law of identity. You may not like it, but that's just logic.
So if chemicals come together, chemicals and a power
chemicals are not intentional.
Right, but they can emerge. They can lead to something that emerges as intentional. Why could they not be? We know emergence exists. We don't know that a non-corporeal, intentional first cause exists, but we know emergence does. So you can't have something that has not been proven to exist. You can't have something.
I'm proving it now, and you're floundering, my friend.
I don't understand. How am I floundering? I'm saying that you're going beyond. You're making
You're just
hits
saying
logic that are
emergent property
unwarranted.
as a special placeholder, just like the God of the Gaps. You're saying emergent property is a God of the Gaps argument for me. It's a Rudyard Kipling just so story, and it's not rational. And you're saying, well, I just like it, so therefore it must be true.
Well, how is it not rational?
Because you're saying
recognize
unintentionality is intending intention.
unintentionality is intending intention.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, and by an emergent property, that's what you mean by that.
Unintentionality can lead to intention, not intending. Yeah. Unintentionality can intend.
It can unintentionally intend intention.
No. So why are you inserting that you're basically why are you inserting that it can lead to? You remove the intend, the redundant intend. It can lead to intention. It can lead to intention, not unintentionality doesn't intend. That's
So
literally the blind watchmaker. Literally the blind watchmaker.
You are just repeating memes from Richard. Richard Dawkins is not the sharpest knife in a door.
Read the book.
That's what I'm saying. Richard Dawkins is not that smart. When it comes to metaphysics, he's an embarrassment, okay? You ever heard what Ed Fazer says? He said Richard Dawkins wouldn't know the difference between metaphysics and metamucil.
Well, he's a biologist. So why would he? He's about interested
because he's pontificating about what he doesn't understand with great verve and passion, and he shouldn't do that.
So if you look, he might overstep his boundaries. He's a biologist, but what I'm saying is,
then he should keep his mouth shut.
Yeah. If you look up the word, if you just Google the word metaphysics right now, the first definition is something that does not exist in reality. Like, I don't even know
why do we talk about it as if it's real?
Because we have brains that can imagine and process and
okay. So is your brain contingent?
My brain's contingent on my heart and pumping blood and keeping me alive.
It's contingent. Its category is contingent. Is all the universe contingent being?
Is that a question?
Sorry?
Was that a question?
Yeah. Is the entire universe contingent?
Entire universe? So from what I understand, and from reading cosmologists like Sagan and Carroll and Tyson, you have the cosmos, which I don't know how much we've explored that, but then you have a local presentation of our universe, and then you obviously have our planet within that. So I don't know. We're experiencing a local presentation of our universe right now, but outside the universe is considered the cosmos that may have always existed and may be eternal. Like we haven't thoroughly explored that. So I'm saying, you're kind of like, I was taught as a Christian, don't go beyond what's written. And I think in science, you don't go beyond what we know. You can theorize.
What Richard Dawkins has told you.
No, so water's emergent property, crystallization, magnetism, swarm behavior, chemical reactivity, jealousy, consciousness, wind. Something can't be a candidate explanation if it hasn't been proven to exist. So if you have, let's say you have a niece. I take your niece for a boat ride and she drowns. I stand before a judge and I can't, it could be negligent homicide. It could be intentional homicide. What it can't be is mermaids, and it can't be a spectral evidence. It can't be like, I can't say like Trey put a curse on us and that's how she drowned. I can't say mermaids did it because they don't exist. They can't even be a candidate explanation. So something that hasn't been proven to exist cannot even be in the conversation. It can't be a candidate explanation until it's proven to exist. We know emergent properties exist all the time: wind, water, crystallization, magnetism, swarm behavior, chemical reactivity, jealousy, consciousness. All those are emergent properties. So they can be candidate explanations. Something that's an intentional agent outside of everything that's existed eternally, that has intelligence and intentionality, you're going beyond what's written, to quote my pastors.
Okay, so you say that everything is contingent, non-contingently then, because you're a materialist, and matter is contingent by definition, right?
Yeah. Well, there's antecedent factors. There's antecedent factors. Just like our will and our there's antecedents, right?
Okay, but so you're asserting that the universe created itself before it existed, because it's all contingent.
Well, so the cosmos could be eternal. We don't know. We don't have the tools yet.
Okay, so are you eternal?
Am I eternal? Not that I'm aware of.
Are you self-existent? To be eternal is to be self-existent. Are you self-existent?
I'm not.
Okay, then the universe is not eternal. You're self-existent. I'm
did you
saying
get there?
I will agree that there is something that's self-existent, but it's not me. That's the point. There is two types of ontologies here in this universe. There is self-existent being or necessary being, and there is contingent or dependent being. I am dependent. Are you familiar with modus ponens, the principle of modus ponens? If A implies B and A is granted, then B necessarily follows. If there is a creation or if there's a contingent being, there must be a necessary non-contingent creator. It's a necessary corollary. Because you can't create yourself before you exist.
Right, but we don't know that the cosmos has not always existed. We don't know that it's not eternal. We don't know. I mean, energy is not created.
We do, because it changes. Anything that changes is not self-existent. It's a hierarchical thing we're talking about.
Yeah, but you're talking about people, and you're talking about our local presentation.
Everything that we know.
I'm talking about the cosmos outside of the universe. The cosmos that may have given birth to universes, may have given birth to multiple universes. Like there's so many there's so many possible theories on that.
But you can't have an eternal regress of contingent changing things creating itself.
Well, that's like one of like many options. There's probably like a dozen or two of possibilities. Turtles all the way down is one option that people
that's contingent being non-contingent or self-creation. There's only two options, my friend.
No, I think there's last I counted during my
tell
course,
me what they are 20, then.
There were 21.
I'll tell you, they're just an iteration of the other.
Let me see. I actually had notes, but as I looked for this, I wanted to mention though. I think I found the hiccup. So unintentionality can lead to intentionality. Not you kept saying unintentionality intends intentionality. That's why it sounds weird and doesn't make sense. Unintentionality can lead to intentionality. If you fix the word in the middle, it can lead to intentionality.
So it can intend intention.
No, it can lead to intention. You're using the wrong word there.
No, you're using the ambiguous term. I'm using the clear word.
Lead to unintentionality can lead.
Does it intend it? Because unintentionality is unintentional. It cannot lead to anything other than unintentionality.
No, you can have an unintentional fire on the thruway, unintentional chemical reaction on the thruway. Unintentionality can lead to accidents that can end up being intentional, or that can end up being existent and having perceived intent.
Perceived intent. Well, the only way you can perceive that there's perceived intent is if there's a perceiver who is teleological.
Yeah, well, we're perceivers now that we have sentience.
Okay, so whatever example you give doesn't really matter as long as you're perceiving it and you're intending it. That's what we're looking for.
So I have notes from like literally 18 years, or from when I was into theology, but just a couple for necessary beings, independent beings, dependent beings, self-existent beings. I think I have a dozen here, and I think there's like 24, but the eternality of universe, there's emergence, which we talked about, dependent existence, contingency and composition, process philosophy, infinite regress, modal realism.
You're just repeating the same ones over and over in different capacities.
I have the
self-existent, or remember I gave you 4 possibilities, and the first 2 are irrational. The last 2, self-existent, were created by something that's self-existent. So you've got contingent being and you've got self-existent being. You can sit there. Every single one of those you gave me is one of those categories.
So dependent existence. Some philosophers argue that self-existence is not a necessary condition for the existence of contingent beings.
But they're not rational.
They propose
I don't care who they are. I don't really care about names. I don't care how pertinent they are. If they don't say something that makes sense, I'm not going to,
Well, isn't that subjective though? So Narguana, Kant, and Hume were just idiots.
Who?
So I actually, in my notes, like I said, this has to be 10, 15 years old. In my notes, I actually have the philosophers that hold like dependent existence. Narguana, Kant, and Hume, they're idiots.
Who's Narguana? I don't know who that is. Is that what you said?
It's a philosopher from I think the early 1900s.
Okay, I think Kant had some serious holes in his lives. I've read the arguments for Hume for attacking theism, which Kant thought they were very compelling. I don't remember exactly what it is. It's in the second book of scientific observation or something, and it was laughably silly. I'm not saying he's an idiot, but I'm saying on this
Right.
issue he's just flat wrong.
Well,
And I don't really care who it is. If you don't
Well,
give me a reason.
let me get through this. So just to show you, like those three, and they're well-known icons in philosophy. So some philosophers argue that self-existence is not necessarily a condition for the existence of contingent beings. They propose that dependent beings can exist without relying on self-existent entity. According to this view, contingent beings can arise from a web of interdependent relationships or causal processes without the need for a self-existent foundation.
Okay, so
that's one of 20, about like 24.
But Randy, that's self-creation. You realize that, right?
Or eternal existence. Like eternal existence is one of them.
Okay, then that is self-existent. But anything that changes is not self-existent.
Right. So my initial point was the cosmos could be self-existent, eternally.
You're not self-existent. You're not you're in the cosmos. You have to make a delineation between you and whatever it is that is self-existent. I agree with that. You're just conceding argument there.
I don't know if I could go with you. I don't think I could trek with you with because we now have entities that exist finally, currently that have an intention and purpose. That means that you can go all the way back to the cosmos, and that had to have intention and purpose. Like I said, there's emergent properties, there's accidents, there's, I gave the example of the hot stove. There's even with sentient beings, you have unintentionality leading to intention. I don't know if I can. You're kind of going one step too far. And like I said, there's so many candidate explanations for that. I can't just.
You haven't given any.
I just said emergence, the eternality of universe, emergence, dependent existence, contingency and composition, process philosophy, infinite regress, modal realism, pantheistic and panentheistic views, denial of necessity altogether, holism.
You're either saying it's self-existent or it's contingent.
I mean, I can.
Every single one of those.
No, they're saying that it could be like a web of contingent things that
it doesn't matter. I don't care. You can give me 20 billion gazillion contingent beings. They cannot be self-existent. It doesn't matter. All you do is add complexity to the argument, violating Occam's razor there. That's what Matt did. It does not matter how many numbers you add to it. That's not going to make it any better. It's going to make it worse. You could say, oh, it's an infinite regress of contingent beings. Well, add even more to it. Well, so what? It's irrational.
So like holism, HOLISM, I might have touched that during a semester at Stanford, but holism is the philosophical view that emphasizes the interconnectedness and interdependence of parts within a whole. From holistic perspective, contingent beings can be seen as a part of a larger system or a network, and their existence is contingent upon the overall organization of interactions within the system. The view downplays the necessity of a self-existence and highlights the importance of holistic frameworks for understanding contingent beings. And Merleau-Ponty, David Bohm, and Arthur Schopenhauer, like these are like philosophical icons that I'm saying there's probably 24 of these. I have like 10 that I just, when I took my course at Stanford this semester on philosophy. I mean, there's so many to pin the tail on a donkey on one of them and say that's got to be it. Like I can't go there. That's going beyond what I think. It's stretching my credulity beyond the breaking point, I think
everything that you have expressed so far, Randy, has been just trivially easy to deal with. I don't care who said it. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter how big or popular a person is. I don't care how pointy their hat is and they sit on a throne. If they say something that's not reasonable, we should just not listen to it. I'm a big fan of just testing everybody. I don't fall at people's feet in worship because they tell me they're important. I say, give me the reason for it, or I'm not going to follow it.
Right. What you're saying is you kind of have like your pet favorite out of the 24 philosophical standpoints.
All those 24 are just an iteration of really going to be the 4 possibilities, but usually they're going to be self-existent or contingent.
Yeah, I would say that when you say unintentionality can intend intentionality, I would say that if you fix the middle word there, unintentionality can lead to.
Why can it not lead putting a bow on a pack? You're trying to change it so it makes it more palatable to be irrational.
Why couldn't unintentionally not lead to intentionality?
Because it's unintentional, by definition.
But how can you prove that it can't? How can you prove it can't lead to intentionality?
Because the law of identity says something is what it is and not something else. It's unintentional.
Yes.
It's not intentional.
Yes. Have you ever unintentionally bumped into someone and they fell
Yes,
down?
I'm an intentional being.
Right.
And I make mistakes. I'm not perfect.
Oh, so now you're adding another attribute. So this eternal thing has to be a being. It has to be conscious. It has to be can't make mistakes. Like you're without
A
warrant.
mistake is something you learn from somebody else. Somebody teaches you something. You're contingent upon the person that corrected you. Now you're arguing like Richard Dawkins. He made a stupid argument like that once. He said, God can't change. I can change my mind. God can't change his mind. Therefore, I can do something God can't do. It's laughable. That's not a perfection. That's a flaw.
Yeah.
Anyway, how about, is it possible for us to go to questions now? I think we've sufficiently done this. Donnie, are you there?
Yes, actually, we just hit the 43-minute mark. I was going to stop it at the 45-minute mark, but if you guys wanted to maybe utilize the last few minutes to kind of wrap up your thoughts and points for the debate in kind of the form of like a closing summary or statement. Trey, since you're in the affirmative, why don't we give you the first closing statement? Let's say up to 5 minutes, gentlemen, and then we'll jump in.
Affirmative goes first and last, usually.
Okay, yeah. If you'd like, we can have Randy go first then, and then we'll give you the last, let's say 5 minutes, Trey, if that works for you, gentlemen.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, so Randy, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours, and up to 5 minutes for a closing statement.
Yep. So I appreciate Trey's energy and his time and everything like that. I'd love to have further conversation with him, but I think, and I wish we would have got it to actual evidence for Christianity or lack thereof. But I think I kind of hit the nail on the head, or I pinpoint the part where it's the part we disagree on is unintentionality can lead to intentionality. Unintentionality obviously cannot intend because it's unintentional. It's a contradiction in terms, but unintentionality can lead to intentionality. I also don't think, like I said, analytical arguments get you anywhere. Analytical arguments can lead to theories. Theories then have to be tested empirically, and then that actually validates the whole string. But we didn't get there. I don't think analytic. I would love to hear his theoretical portion and his empirical portion for Christianity, because like I said, I don't think Christians have the same evidentiary standard. I don't believe Muslims do. I don't believe anyone that does. I believe religion goes a step too far, kind of like some of Trey's arguments go kind of like a step too far, especially when there's other philosophers, many philosophers that have given other perspectives, and it's something that's nebulous. It's philosophical. It's not something that that can be proven out because it's analytical in nature. You're kind of defining your own terms. So if you define your terms and you make your terms mean what you want them to mean, then obviously the conclusion is going to follow because you've defined your own terms. You essentially defined God into existence, which I think is a dangerous thing to do. So there's that. But I would love to maybe at some point we can get into maybe there'll be some questions or whatever that will lead to actual questions about Christianity specifically. But yeah, I think that's my closing remarks on that part.
Randy, thank you very much for your closing remarks. I appreciate it. Let me restart the timer. And Trey, we're going to hand it over to you now for your closing remarks. The floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much for this opportunity to engage. And Randy, I really appreciate your spirit, your attitude. You're very charitable, very kind. I'm kind of sassy and strong sometimes, and you didn't respond in anger or anything like that. I appreciate that. And you're very generous in your spirit. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the fact that you didn't obfuscate either. Sometimes I'll have people and they'll use the, what do you call that? The, can't think of the word. They'll talk a lot instead of actually engaging with the argument. Anyway, so what I did is I made an argument for the existence of God. And as I said, those are analytical arguments. And they arguments that if you grant law of non-contradiction, if you grant basic reliability of sense perception, the necessary conclusion is going to be that there is a self-existent creator that created me, because I am not self-existent. I'm a contingent being, And I could not have created myself, and I know that I'm not an illusion. And so, therefore, it logically follows that there is somewhere, somehow, an immaterial, because matter is confined by space, therefore is contingent, uh, eternal, non-contingent, necessary being that gives rise and sustains, I would even say, everything that we have, because I cannot exist contingently, non-contingently in any sense. Otherwise, I have to be dependent upon nothing. You can't be dependent independently. So if I exist, the inquirer exists, it necessarily follows that there is a creator and a sustainer who is self-existent. And furthermore, that self-existent being is purposive because I myself, or intentional because I myself am an intentional being. Unintentionality cannot give rise or lead to, as Randy would say, intentionality, because it would have to be intentional in order to do so. And an emergent property is just a magic term that 19th century philosophers use, but like I said, we're living in the 21st century. We can move beyond that. There's a lot more to that. And I think we can be much more tight with our analytical scientific method by being intellectually rigorous with our standards. I didn't get to the evidence of Christianity, but before I move into that, I want my opponent to either rebut the arguments that I've given or say that, or concede the arguments to move along, because like I said, if you're going to deny the analytical nature, why would I waste my time on the evidential? Because you're already dedicated to denying reality from the onset. So in my sense, it would kind of be like casting pearls before swine. So with that, I'd like to close and say thank you very much, Donny, and thank you, Randy. You both are very kind, and I very much appreciate this opportunity to interact. And hopefully we can all learn something from this exchange.
Absolutely, Trey. Thank you very much for that closing statement. Gentlemen, excellent debate. I appreciate how cordial and professional you both were. You gave me an easy job tonight in terms of moderation, put it that way. So lots of great feedback from the chat as well. And so that's what this is all about, edifying the audience, learning something, and sitting back and listening to two people of opposing views, opposing worldviews engage these points. So with that, we do have several interesting questions for the both of you. And so typically what we do on Standing for Truth with the Q&A period is whoever the question's for example, let's say it's for you, Trey, obviously you get to answer first, and then Randy can give a rebuttal or a response, and then we would throw it back to you, Trey, for a final word. So essentially whoever the question is for gets the final word, and then we'll move to the next. And so let's just start right at the beginning. And okay, here we go. First question comes in from Iron Matt. And it looks like it's a question for you, Randy. How do you get, in brackets, no free will, determinism without an all-knowing God who determines everything?
So there's, wait, how do I get no free will?
How do you get, maybe he's saying
you said you don't believe in free will.
Right.
Randy.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, so look, I've got it on screen here. So he's saying, how do you get essentially without free will, if you don't hold the free will, determinism without an all-knowing God who determines everything?
Yeah, so the materialism determines it. So if you have antecedent factors, so I don't know, if I decide to go, if I'm driving on a hot summer day and I decide to go get a milkshake, there was a lot of things that led up to that. There was, maybe I hadn't had ice cream in a long time. Maybe it was really hot. Maybe the ice cream place was open there. So you can basically look at the dominoes, from probably beginning of time, look at the dominoes. And if you were to hit those dominoes in the same spot and it led up to me driving down that road in that car, in that condition, in that season, with that state of hunger and that state of not having something sweet, it's all those antecedent dominoes that lead up to that that lack of free will and that decision. That's why it's not. I'll admit it's not fun to think that. I could see why there's more depression in atheism than there is in Christianity or Islam, and that it's not fun to think of that we're not the authors of our thoughts. We're kind of reporting our thoughts, but it's antecedent factors that lead up to that decision. They determine, I guess, to answer the question directly, they determine those that final act. So whatever it is, your biology, your neurology, your stomach, the driving to use my milkshake example, all those antecedent factors determine your action. That's how I do it without a God.
Appreciate the response, Randy. Trey, over to you.
If there is anything that's determined in this universe, it cannot become about indeterminately. Again, the law of identity, and it's going to be intentionality. To determine its intent toward a goal, and so that's the same thing we were just talking about. But my question for you, Randy, is if everything is determined, do you believe in punishing people in order to get them to change their minds?
Yes, because you don't know how their biology will react. I believe in it's called restorative justice. So one of my sons is taking criminal justice right now, and there's help me out here. Restorative justice. There's
Punitive or something.
Punitive justice. So there's like just pure punishment, which is an unfortunate thing in religion. But there's restorative justice. So I believe in the attempts of restorative justice because you don't know how that person's neurology and biology is going to respond to correction. So yeah, I do believe in that.
But do you think the punishment will change their action? Are you appealing to a person when you say you should not talk back to your mother, say to your child?
Yes, and you and the hope as a child, I hope that my three sons are as rational as I did. So my parents told me not to talk back. I listened to my mom or my dad.
Because they could choose to not to?
Well, they can be determined not to. Their biology could respond to that parental authority.
So you're not talking to them. There's no person there. There's no person there. You're just speaking to chemicals. I
mean, you can boil it down to that. Yeah, I don't believe in the soul or personhood or anything special. I mean, it's we're so yeah, that's true. And I hope, and I actually saw that with my three sons. Like I said, the middle one was an atheist. The youngest one was most Christian out of all of them, and the oldest I felt just kind of like was indifferent. So I saw their neurology and their biology respond to the gospel message differently, respond to my discipline. The middle one was to use a colloquial term, strong-willed. But that's his biology and neurology responding to my parenting and my discipline. So yeah, your hope is that their biology and neurology is going to be respond in a restorative way.
Okay, gentlemen, appreciate the back and forth there. Iron Matt, thank you for the question, and we'll move on to the next now. Okay, next question comes in from Free Naturalist. Question for Lying for Jesus. Randy, you're kind of in the hot seat tonight, so I will say most questions are for you. And this specific question is, are you willing to provide a logical explanation as to why a God is improbable, besides saying there's no evidence? Go ahead.
I don't know if I would say improbable. I don't know that. Well, let me rephrase that. So, a logical explanation why it's improbable. I mean, there's the classic, the problem of quote unquote evil. There's dysteleology. There's a lack of evidence. There's a whole, basically an entire like tissue layered of things that I would, if there was an intelligent, rational being, would he create humans in this way with so many observable flaws? Would he, allow things? Because if there's things that are off the table, like I can't jump over my house, right? Like I can run, I could jump in a high jump, I can javelin. I can't jump over my house. But so he made the rules of the game. This deity. Why did he allow, the ability for an adult to rape a child, kind of thing? There's things that are just physically impossible, and he made the rules to the game. And it's kind of like sitting back saying, we're going to make this game, and it's going to be violent. People are going to get hurt, and people are going to die, and people are going to suffer. But let's go ahead and do it. So those are like, I mean, they're kind of classic. Like I said, I see a teleology, which is a lack of design, and I also see basically the rules of the game. I think if he could have made any possible universe, to make this one, I think it's improbable. But like I said, I'm open to, I'll follow the truth wherever it leads. Like I said in my opening, if it leads to atheism, Buddhism, Mormonism, Christianity, but I don't, just the current conditions of the world, I don't doesn't look probable, and I don't think the evidence meets its burden of proof. And that standard that we use every day in other things.
Thank you, Randy. Trey, over to you. The floor is yours.
Well, I thought it was funny that Randy just basically said that God is improbable because he's sinful, and what he's doing, he's assuming that there's such a thing as the sanctity of existence, that existence is somehow special, and anything that violates that sanctity of existence, say for your child getting cancer or something like that, is an objectively bad thing. And he can't do that because there is no teleology in his perspective. And he may say, well, I imagine that it is special, which is fine, but it's what you're doing. You're just making a crutch for yourself because you can't face reality. If you're going to be objectively true, you'd be a nihilist because that's what you say objective reality is, but you can't get away from it. You know that existence is somehow special. And so then you get mad at God because he violates the standard that you know exists. And so saying it's improbable for the problem of evil, you have to assume the very existence of the sanctity of existence in order to complain about God the way he does things. So anyway.
Can I interact, or are we kind of just gonna keep it like concise?
Yeah, if you'd like to, you can interact a little bit. Sure.
Yeah. So I think the sticking point here is, I'm saying if I jump from the world I perceive as material world also into the God world, where actually there is intention and there is a God and he is watching over us and he did create. So you kind of have to separate that. It's kind of like a lot of Christians will say, I think Frank Turek said to Christopher Hitchens when Christopher Hitchens was alive. So Christopher Hitchens doesn't believe there's a God and he hates him. Well, no, we're the question was, why is it not probable? Because if it's probable, so I have to jump into your world, Trey, in order to say why it's not probable. I mean, you're kind of like mixing our two worlds together. So I have my materialistic world, and then you have your teleological world. And so for me to jump into improbability, I have to jump into your world and say, like, if there really is a God, here's all the problems that I see with it. I'm not really taking your worldview and like mixing it up with mine. I'm jumping into yours for a second to give the.
No, Randy, you live in my world every single day. You think that existence is special, right?
It's subjectively special, though.
Objectively, is it a fact though? Is it objectively special?
Subjectively special.
No, objectively. Is it an objective fact that existence is special?
To us, to humans. So
no, I'm saying, is it an objective fact that existence is special, or is it meaningless from an objective perspective?
I don't know if you can go that far, say objective. I think it's very subjective. And the analogy I use,
you impose value upon reality. Would that be a fair thing to say?
I impose subjective value on things that I value. Right. Yes,
but it's not really valuable, right?
Not in an objective sense. No,
okay. So you're living in my world. You do it every day. That's all you do. You
borrow
from my world so that you can make it through life.
Yeah, I don't see that. I see it being subjective and speciesist. Yeah.
Okay.
If I see a dog and a baby and a car's backing out, I'm going to grab the baby because I'm a human.
That's right. Because
I'm not going to grab the dog.
You are determined to sanctify existence, but determination doesn't happen indeterminately.
Now,
anyway, I don't want to get too much on this.
Yeah, I was going to say the last thing. If we're in Africa and we see a dingo, a dingo puppy and a human puppy, there's a good chance that, and a dingo's running by a car that's backing out, there's a good chance that the dingo grabs the dingo puppy and not the human baby. We kind of value our like, every species has its subjectiveness to it.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you again for the interaction on these questions. Next question comes in from Kevin's Biblical Discussions. Again, it's for you, Randy, and he asks, have you looked into Bible prophecy and facts concerning the resurrection of Jesus Christ? Gary Habermas, ?
Yeah. the Gary Habermas minimal effects. That was part of my like deconversion over a number of years. And I'm getting ready to post this. So I've read probably 11 books on prophecy and criteria, both from like the atheist side and from the Christian side. And I actually have a criteria. A prophecy should be clear, specific, accurate. I'd have a timeliness to it, have an independent verification to it. We can evaluate the source of the prophecy, the context of the prophecy, the purpose of the prophecy. So a prophecy has to meet all these criteria, and it's not my subjective. I read almost 11 books on this from both worldviews and they all agree on these 8 criteria. So yes, the short answer is yes, and it kind of felt like dominoes. I kind of was almost like a disciple of Hank Hanegraaff back in the mid 90s, 1996. And he used the maps, manuscript evidence, archaeological evidence, prophetic evidence, and statistical probability. And those, when I started trying to reach my son, I was listening to Justin Bradley's podcast and going through it, and it was like the world's leading, person on archaeology, and then a secular one, and they went and they discussed that. And it just, they kind of felt like dominoes. I don't think the manuscript evidence is impressive enough. I don't think the archaeological evidence is impressive enough. I don't think the prophetic evidence is impressive enough. And the statistic probability is not impressive enough for me, based on the standard that I use every day in my legal affairs, my medical affairs, my financial affairs. So that's where I came. But the short answer is yes. I extensively looked into prophecy and the resurrection and textual criticism and the Gospels.
Appreciate it, Randy. Trey, if there's anything you'd like to add or respond to, go ahead.
Whatever I'm going to interpret predictive prophecy or even manuscriptural evidence, I'm going to begin with the existence of a self-existent creator and a teleological creator. Those are indisputable. So you've got a God, and then you've got to say, okay, now which religion is going to make the most sense? So I think Christianity is without peer.
Thank you, Trey. Randy, since the question was for you, you get the last word.
No, I really don't have a response to that. I think he's kind of starting with an assumption, though. That's my only comment on that.
Okay, gentlemen, appreciate it. Next question comes in from Uncensored Pilgrims. Thank you for your question. And question for @LyingForJesus. What evidence for God have you searched for and failed to find?
It's similar to the previous question: the manuscript evidence, archaeological evidence, prophetic evidence, and the statistical probability. I kind of looked into those, and I also looked into evolution and Darwin. They were like swear words, like in my upbringing. Not so much in the Catholic Church, but once I got to the Pentecostal and the non-denominational, which was more of a Baptist church, I learned later, those were demonized heavily by Hanegraaff and then by the churches I belonged to. Evolution. I didn't even know why I didn't like it. I just knew it was wrong and it was bad. And I started looking into it, and I started looking at the quotes and the quote unquote proofs against evolution. And I'm like, okay, they're quote mining, they're putting stuff out of context, they're quoting scientists from the 1800s. We have a plethora of scientific consilience since the 1800s, and they're kind of like, it's very strawmanic. But I was looking for, I literally was going to write a book on miracles. And I searched, I say a good 18 months for like any convincing miracles, and they all like fell through. And I'll try to make this quick. I don't want to drone on, but you have the missionary couple that goes to, Uganda, or I don't know, wherever they go. And they're down to their last bowl of rice, and they're praying and praying, praying. And there's, they need, $13 to keep the lights on, et cetera, et cetera. Later that night, someone knocks on the door, and they give them a check for exactly $13. So I followed up on all those, like I was literally wanting to write a book, because I'm like, why is no one writing a book on like miracles and like documenting them and like irrefutable proof? Just find like the best 12 miracles and make a book. And I don't care if I make a penny off it. I want to prove to my son and to my friends and to my extended family, because my extended family are still Roman Catholic to this day, and they don't even know about the Bible. They don't, they kind of live according to Mother Church. So I desperately wanted to write a book on miracles and just travel the world and document miracles. And I could not find a valid miracle. That $13 ended up being like $11.50, and then they found some cans later that week, and it was ended up being $13. They took recyclables back for 5-cent deposit or something or whatever, recycled them. It was so like convoluted. Every time I followed up on a miracle, it was very inconclusive. So the miracles fell, the prophecy fell. When you have people working towards a goal, so when you that's not impressive for prophecy. When you have people, the writers of the New Testament were definitely familiar with the Old Testament, so to retrofit something to make it sound like it fits a prophecy, we see a lot of that. So it was just so many things, but literally everything I searched for, and the archaeology really, people can intentionally, that's actually a con. It's a form of a con. When you have the Bible mentioning cities and leaders and places and known events, it's actually a known con. It's called name dropping. You do that to lend credibility. So things that are easily attainable, you name drop those to lend credibility to other things that aren't verifiable or information that's not attainable. So all that stuff just failed in the end. Basically, to answer your question, everything that I tried, I desperately tried to not only find evidence to strengthen my faith, but to reach my son, to reach my family, and it just wasn't there.
Randy, thank you for the response. Trey, the floor is yours if there's anything you'd like to add.
I find it really funny that Randy criticizes Christians being quoted from the 18th century when his whole argument for emergent properties is just a 19th century form of spontaneous generation from the Darwinian synthesis. That is kind of rich. And I could talk about predictive prophecy. I mean, Luke is considered to be the greatest historian of antiquity, according to Sir William Ramsay, who was a premier archaeologist who spent his entire life checking out the book of Acts, Luke Acts. He actually moved to Palestine, and he was part of the Tübingen school, which basically is a liberal school that said that the book of Acts was written 100 years later after when it was purported to have been written. And he went through and he said, further studies show that the book could bear the most minute scrutiny and authority for the facts of the Aegean world, and it was written with such judgment, skill, art, perception of truth as to be a model of historical statement. He said, you may press the words of Luke in a degree beyond any other historians. And he said his considered to be among the greatest of all historians. Sir Edward Musgrave Blaylock called him among the greatest. He said he should be placed with Thucydides, who's the father of scientific history. So to say that somehow that's name dropping for somebody who spent his entire life verifying the minute detail of New Testament, saying he's of the greatest historians ever to live, is a bit weak, I would say.
Can I do a quick response to that?
Yeah, it's your question, so you can have the last word, Randy.
All right. So that spontaneous generation was disproved like within 20 years. So Jean-Baptiste Helmont theorized that, and within like 20 years, Francisco Redi disproved. So by
right, but that without it, Darwinian synthesis never would have taken off.
Well, that was in the 1600s. So how did Darwin build on that? It was disproved in 1600.
No, it was popular within the day of who was the guy that
so
Pasteur.
Van Helmont
Pasteur was a contemporary of Darwin.
Yeah, but Van Helmont was the one who proposed spontaneous generation, and then
Randy, you're proposing it today. You're proposing it today. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but we witness emergent properties today.
See, that's what I'm saying. So it doesn't matter.
Magnetism is an emergent property. Huh?
Okay. All right.
No, it's real. I just wanted to read one thing. So I don't know if you can see this. This is one was my favorite study Bibles, the New Oxford Annotated Bible. So it's a compilation of scholars summarizing scholarly consensus for the past 150 years. I just want to read 2 sentences. So last 150 years of scholarly consensus. An historical genre does not necessarily guarantee historical accuracy or reliability, nor did the evangelists or their first readers engage in historical analysis. Their aim was to confirm the Christian faith, Luke 1:4, John 20:31. Scholars agree that the Gospels were written 40 to 50 years after the death of Jesus, and they thus do not present an eyewitness or contemporary account of Jesus' life or teaching. Even the language has changed. So this is literally, scholars agree that over the last 150 years that they're not eyewitnesses accounts. Also, I'd ask, like, what version of Luke, because there was 3 versions of Luke floating around in as early as the 2nd century. So which version of Luke were you referring to when you quote Luke, and who wrote Luke? That's what I would ask.
There were thousands of versions of Luke floating around in the 2nd century.
Well, there's competing versions of Luke.
No, there weren't.
Yep.
There were thousands of them.
No, but there was competing versions of Luke, and Alexandrian. There was the Alexandrian. There was the.
Those were families of manuscripts, but there were thousands within those. Those are not different accounts. They're just different manuscript families.
But I'm saying they had different. They had different parts of them.
They were never thought of as being different authors.
But so for instance, the Alexandrian version of Luke does not contain Jesus sweating drops of blood. It has a longer ending of Luke and Jesus about Jesus' ascension. It doesn't have casting lots for Jesus' garments. They literally had different versions of Luke floating around. So which was the right version when they
So
had different material?
You're saying that they thought that there were more than one author to Luke.
Well, so the Gospels are not
There
anonymous.
are people making copies, and copyists make errors. Do you agree with that?
No, why is there whole sections? So it has 97% of Mark. Actually, so over 75% of Mark's Gospel verbatim is found in Luke, and there was different versions of Luke. They had whole sections missing in that. So where did the new sections come from?
What do you mean?
Where did the drops of blood come from?
Were missing?
So in the 3 versions of Luke, the Alexandrian, for instance, does not contain Jesus sweating drops of blood, longer ending of Luke about Jesus' ascension, casting lots for Jesus' garment.
Which isn't a Christian.
Where did they come from, though?
I don't know how it got in there, but that's the longer ending of. Did you say Luke, or did you say longer ending of Luke or Mark?
So Matthew and Luke contain about 75% verbatim from Mark. Mark was like a source document that they used. There's over 75% of Mark's content is found both in Matthew and Luke, and 95% of Mark is found in at least 1 or 2 of the other Gospels. Luke at times repeats verbatim what is in Mark, and even borrows context in order that is unique to Matthew. So I mean, it's literally Luke copied basically 75% or more from Mark or Q.
He used it as a source document, probably.
Right, but where did the 3 versions come from, and why were they still floating around in the 2nd century? And why were they different?
Well, there were more than 3 versions. I can guarantee you.
Right. So how is that an author? If someone wrote a gospel, so they were anonymous, and then in the 2nd century they were eponymous, which means they had names attributed to them. They went from anonymous to eponymous. Eponymous means that you attribute a name to something. Well,
we know that the author of Luke was a traveling companion with Paul, and so either Titus or Paul. I mean Titus or Luke. That's not really controversial.
Right. Well, that's the claim, though. But that was written decades after, and there were still different versions floating around, and it was anonymous. In the 2nd century, it became eponymous. Eponymous means you assign a name to something. Like if
it wasn't for no reason. Luke does not name his name in there, which
why would you not sign it though initially? Why don't we have an autograph?
Oh, well, because he didn't do it the way Randy did it. Therefore, it's wrong.
I mean, that's how things are lend credibility to
are done today. That's how my mom does it. So it must be the way everybody does it.
No, gentlemen,
okay.
I appreciate the back and forth, and I think we've got time for 1, maybe 2 more questions. And Trey, I found a question for you. So Randy, you don't get all the fun for tonight. So Trey, this comes in from Free Naturalist. Question for Trey. Do you think intuition is a reliable pathway to knowing what is objectively true?
I don't like that. I don't want to say there's no intuition, because I think there is a sensus divinitatis. I think that we have the work of the law written on our minds. In other words, we know instinctively that it's wrong to murder. It's wrong to commit adultery. We know that it's, every major society has a 7-day work week. We know intuitively that we should wear clothes, but that's an intuition. It's not something you can go and like read. So I don't like using intuition as like a proof or something like that. Obviously we do have intuitions or determinations that guide us, but I'm not comfortable saying that's a reliable pathway for knowing what is objectively true.
Appreciate the response, Trey. Randy, over to you if you had anything you'd like to add. Oh, I think you might be on mute.
I was trying not to sip water in Trey's ear while he's trying to talk. No, I don't think intuition's a reliable pathway to truth. I think evidence is a reliable pathway to truth.
Thank you, Randy. Trey, if there's anything you'd like to say in terms of a final word.
No, I generally agree.
Okay, gentlemen, I think we'll wrap it up with this. Final question comes in from Redefine Living. And the question is for you, Randy. How, from your worldview, can you justify a single universal statement about anything?
A universal statement? So we can have maximal certainty about things based on investigation. So I'm not sure if I understand. Maybe if you, Donny or Trey, if you can know what they're trying to get at. Universal statement.
Maybe I wonder if they're talking about maybe you can have like certainty about something or to know something for certain. Maybe.
So yeah, I can have maximal certainty that my sons are my sons, my wife is my wife. I can have maximal certainty that I own a house. As we talked about, unless it's an illusion or I'm a brain in a vat and I'm, this is a simulation. Even if it's a simulation, I probably still own the house. I don't know, but I mean, how from your rule can you justify a single universal statement about anything? I don't know. I know that we are conscious living beings and we assess things, and we even can offer. So I have a business partner in Singapore. I live in New York, so we can definitely independently verify things. So so we can have independent verification, but we have to rely on our senses, as Trey alluded to earlier in the discussion.
It looks like he might have clarified a little bit, at least Randy here. So he said, because he is not omniscient and he rejects revelation from an omniscient being, what justifies any universal statement? Does that help at all, maybe, to clarify it? Or
what justifies any universal statement? I guess I need a definition on a universal statement. I'm not sure. Is that like a all-encompassing statement? Like
he's like saying, could you be wrong about everything that you believe in? It sounds kind of like a presuppositional type of a question. It's like, how can you have any certainty when you don't even know that you exist? I guess you could say, for certainty. And what I would say is, well, we don't.
I think, therefore I am.
What's that?
I think, therefore I am. I mean, unless I've invented every song and every movie and,
But you would say that your knowledge is provisional. And so a lot of Christians want to say that, well, since I believe in God, therefore I can have certain knowledge about things. But I disagree with that. I think only God has certainty. We have faith. We trust things. And not Christians, all contingent beings exercise faith. Like, I believe that the law of non-contradiction is going to hold in the next statement I have. I can't prove it, but I assume it. And so faith, the question is not whether you have faith or not, but whether you have a good faith or a bad faith. And so only God is the one who has certainty from my perspective.
Yeah, I hold to maximal certainty based on investigation.
Or true justified belief.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, okay, great job in the audience Q&A period. I appreciate the back and forth on some of these questions. Excellent questions from our audience. I appreciate everybody being so involved and engaged in this debate on an important question. So Trey and Randy, again, it was really great to have you both here. Again, a couple of professionals, very cordial, easy to moderate, so I do appreciate it, and very interesting. delving into some of these questions and points. It definitely got me thinking, and I hope it got the audience thinking as well. That's what these debates are all about. And I'd love to have you both on again at some point in the future. So why don't we get some final words, final thoughts, though? Randy, why don't we start with you again? Thanks for doing this. It really was a great exchange. And some final words, final thoughts.
Yeah, thanks again for hosting it. Trey, thanks again for engaging in your time. I know you're a busy guy there. I can tell by the background there that you're probably doing work. I did put in a lot of work myself this last month, so I can relate. I appreciate, like I said, Trey's energy and his inquisitive spirit and his longing to seek truth, and that I appreciate that no matter what the person's view is, and I hope he keeps seeking truth. And again, the reason I kind of went to emergent properties is because we see that every day. We see magnetism, we see crystals, we see the wind is an emergent property. So from what I understand from my investigation is unintentionality can lead to intention when you have an emergent property, when you have something that in the end is sentient. And we're the only sentient beings that, as of right now, I mean, there's a search for life on other planets as we speak, but we're the only minds that we're aware of, and the only intentional creatures that we're aware of to date. I mean, the Fermi paradox would, and other things in the Drake equation would point to us not being alone, but as of right now, we're the only minds that have emerged in this universe. So I believe, to keep the theme going, I believe that unintentionality can lead to intentionality when you have emergent factors and emergent properties and emergent beings.
Appreciate it, Randy. Thank you for the final words and final thoughts. And again, thank you for your time for this debate. Trey, thank you as well for doing this debate. And some final words, final thoughts.
Well, I just want to say that I had a very enjoyable time. Both Donny and Randy are just delightful people, very gracious. Randy, I really appreciate your generosity. You're very kind. Like I said, the word I was trying to think of before was a filibuster of words. Sometimes people will start just talking and they'll explain for on because they don't want to get into the content. You did none of that whatsoever. You're like, okay, well, what are your view? And you interacted with it honestly. And it's just a delight. And Donny, you're a great host as well. And so I really enjoyed it. And I think that we'll probably engage some more in the future because, Randy, you're a very thoughtful guy. And I really enjoyed the opportunity and enjoyed the questions as well. Thank you to the audience. And so hopefully maybe we can do something like this again in the future.
Trey, I appreciate the kind words. And yes, I really enjoyed how interactive it was. And I was thinking the same thing. The discussion, gentlemen, there was very little filibustering, as you were saying, Trey, but it was very organic, very free flowing. You're asking each other questions, bouncing ideas off of each other. And I think it's one of those discussions that needs to be enjoyed several times just to catch each deep point. And so Trey and Randy, you both clearly know your stuff. And I really appreciate your time that you've given to us for tonight's debate. And so to the audience, thank you so much for tuning in. I am going to stick around just for a few minutes going over some reminders and announcements, as we do have a lot going on here at the ministry, and I'll allow Trey and Randy to enjoy the rest of their night. So again, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you again.
See you.
Bye. Okay, there we go. Another one in the books. Randy and Trey both did a fantastic job tonight. Very easy to moderate. They were both very professional, very cordial, and the points discussed were very interesting. Definitely not my specific specialty, and so I enjoyed sitting back and listening to them engage this topic. Again, the topic being, do Christians have a consistent evidentiary standard? So for those in the audience that want to see more from tonight's guests, do check the description box, as I always do. I put our guests' channels, websites, whatever the relevant links may be in the description box for people to check out. Okay, so I wanted to spend some time just going over a few reminders in terms of events coming up, as we do have a lot for you on Standing for Truth. I would say the next month or so is just packed with so many events. And I just scheduled a bunch more and set a bunch more on the channel for people to see. And so first reminder, tomorrow is one of our main events, summer main events. Pumped for this one. Just two powerhouses in the world of eschatology and preterism. And so William Bell and Dr. Sam Frost, they're going to be here to debate full preterism. Specifically, the proposition is the resurrection of the dead occurred in the past, 70 AD. William Bell taking the affirmative. We've confirmed and agreed on a format. It is going to be very comprehensive, I will say that. So save the date. You're not going to want to miss out on this one. This one is tomorrow. And then Monday, we're going to be back. We've been doing an open mic 2-in-1 event every roughly 10 days. And our open mics go between 4 and 5.5 hours, I would say. And so our next one is on Monday. And so whether you're a skeptic, a non-skeptic, make sure to hit that notification bell. And if you'd like to join for some impromptu debate, some impromptu questions and answers, or just some back and forth discussion, make sure to join. As always, I'll have the StreamYard link posted for everybody. Then shortly after that, we're going to have a defending the divinity of Jesus Christ. We're going to have an open mic. And so again, we like to be interactive. We like to engage our audience. We like to give our supporters and our skeptics the opportunity to join us in these open mic discussions, to ask questions and to engage in debate, because we never want to become an echo chamber. And so Team Standing for Truth, of course, we have our very specific beliefs and positions we hold to, but we want to allow others of differing views, differing worldviews, different positions, those critical of us, to enter the debate dojo, as I like to call it, and engage in these topics, ask us questions. So for this specific open mic, we're going to have Kelly Powers, and it'll be specifically on the question, is Jesus God? And so whatever your flavor is in terms of the nature of God, whether it's the anti-Trinitarian position of Arianism or oneness, modalism, monarchianism, as we just had a debate recently on that between Caleb Percher and Matt Slick. I just booked a debate between Caleb Percher and Dr. Michael Burgos on the proposition Jesus is the Father incarnate. So that's coming up in September as well. Lots to look forward to on the nature of God, including this debate, which has just been confirmed and scheduled. This should be a pretty epic showdown. Kelly Powers and Sean Griffin. Is the Trinity biblical? This will happen in September, the end of September, I believe. We're also working on a date for an open mic on Is Jesus the Father with Matt Slick. A couple last reminders, as we do have just so many events scheduled. So the point is, make sure you're subscribed and make sure you're up on everything that we have. This is just a snapshot of what we have. So here's an eschatology debate. We want to give you a little bit of I'm going to give you a variation in terms of the topics, whether it's the nature of God, atheism, creation versus evolution, eschatology. We want to give you a little bit of everything. So this will be Kirby Tabb and Scott Clem engaging the topic of futurism versus historicism. And I think this is going to be an excellent debate, as Scott and Kirby do a lot in terms of end times theology. And last shout out is the Holy Spirit, the third person in the Trinity. So this will be for the very end of August. I guess this will be a debate that we end August with Carlos Xavier and Pastor Kevin Tremblay. So this will be a formal debate. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. And so I think we'll wrap it up there. Tonight was an excellent debate. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoy re-listening to it and absorbing the points even more. But reminder, we will be back here tomorrow for a debate on full preterism between William Bell and Dr. Sam Frost. And with that, everybody, thank you for tuning in. Share this content around, as critical thinking is important and engaging these topics and issues are important as well. Everybody, God bless, and we'll see you tomorrow night. Standing for Truth is out.